Hi, Russell Sturgis here. Today I'm delivering the third instalment in the series that I've been doing on conscious relationship. And today we're looking at the idea of a relationship that's breaking up. Could be through death, but typically through the fact that two people no longer choose to cohabitate. It's the idea of being able to do that with awareness. Previously we looked at coming into a relationship with awareness. In the last one, in the middle one, we talked about maintaining a relationship through awareness, and this is being able to end a relationship in awareness. Obviously, when somebody's in an authentic place of awareness and lives life as the observer, then traditionally the whole notion of empathy and compassion and benevolence are intrinsic to who you are and obviously how you engage relationship. That comes out of that place of awareness which leads to clarity of purpose and a real sense of having put your hand up to perform your unique form of service in the world. And we've said that profound purpose is really about how you're going to be serving in the world. And remember that I keep on referring to service as our ability to authentically hear self and others in whatever circumstances that we find ourselves. So if you can imagine, here we have a relationship where there's two people who are bringing that level of awareness to the way in which they engage. And so when we start to look at a relationship coming to a place of completion where there's an intimate relationship, it's really the reframing of love, not the completion of love, not the separation, there's an end to all of this. In this type of completion to relationship, it's the fact that the expression of love is reframed. And so if we were to use the concept that Plato inspired, it's this whole idea of platonic relationship where an emotion and spiritual relationship to people exists that doesn't have any sexual desire or sexual engagement. So it's the sort of love that in the New Testament, Jesus talked about the pure love in the Beatitudes, and this is referred to as the pure love of Christ. It's having this real sense of authentic love for another that inspires compassion and the capacity to be empathetic, all the while not having to be bound in any sort of intimacy, sexual intimacy. And it doesn't even require cohabitation. And of course, that can also be the case in people who have committed to each other in relationship. But typically, in a committed relationship, what we're looking at is that in an aware relationship, there is this intimate expression that's able to be freely expressed between two people. And most times that would be monogamous, that would be in the context of that relationship. So when a relationship moves apart where people are aware, there's a completion, there's a finishing to the sexual intimacy and the sexual desire, and in fact there is no desire in that place, but there is still the maintenance of the friendship, and this becomes a platonic friendship, and there's a respect and there's an honouring, and there would still be the capacity to be supportive if required, without fear of anything being compromised in terms of where you've moved to in the separation. Of course, one would expect that these people either would go into another aware relationship or not. And of course, by being in the presence of another aware person, they would not be threatened by the expired relationship. Simply because their sense of empathy and compassion and benevolence would be extended to this other person as well. But the cohabitation, the sexual intimacy and the things that are associated often with cohabitation, sharing resources and things like that in a committed relationship only exists within that core primary relationship. Now that's a far cry from the codependent type of breakups, where you've got two people who are in their codependency really desperate for somebody else to fill a need within themselves. And generally it's about self-worth. Generally it's about feeling loved and lovable. And there's all of this need placed on the relationship that any threat of that disappearing sends one or both of the people into a place of desperation and grief. And of course, associated with grief are all the elements of anger and denial, etc., etc. And so people go through these painful processes of separation in their unaware relationships, which are generally defined by a state of codependency, the idea that somebody else is able to help fulfill a need. And of course, in many of the codependent relationships, what we have is for example, somebody who wants to be rescued, but it requires somebody who needs to be a rescuer. And those relationships work until they don't. And of course, generally that's about the whole idea that somebody's no longer able to supply a need or to meet the need, or the agreement. I call it a trade agreement, which I talked about in the last video. This whole idea that the trade agreement gets broken. And so the person who is reliant on the other person then becomes hurt, and we go through these terrible places of relationships breaking up with a lot of pain and anger and resentment, and of course in some cases it ends up in murder and death and a whole lot of things that end up destroying families, and children get involved, and siblings and other people's lives are destroyed or impacted as a result of these really devastating separations. So as you can see, there's so much suffering that's often brought about through an unaware separation, whereas with an aware separation there isn't suffering. Sure, there's going to be sadness, and it's not about denying the things that may come up as feelings of loss, but because there's no reliance on the other person, there's not going to be the same degree of pain and suffering that would typically be experienced. In fact, what happens is that you move to a place of real gratitude for the experience and the journey that you've shared with this person. And there's a real reverence, and there's a real sense of allowing them to be who it is that they choose to be, without this need of holding on tight, without this need of being able to define your sense of worth through these people being in your life. So what we have is these interdependent relationships versus codependent relationships. And as I expressed before, the reason that somebody who's in an interdependent relationship is able to move on without that same level of pain is that they've got a clear sense of commitment to their purpose. Their purpose being their noble purpose, that is, being their calling, what it is that they're here to do in service in the world. And that's first and foremost in their consciousness in terms of how they move forward. The second thing is that they already have a full measure of their love within themselves. They've already had what I would call that divine awareness, where they've got to see themselves as God sees them in this really beautiful dynamic expression of their worth and their value. And so they're not needing this from this other person. So when you've got purpose and this strong sense of your worth and your self-love, you don't require that of other people. And so there's no codependency. There's no need for anybody else to have to show up in order for you to be able to move on in life in a healthy state, in a state of well-being, in a state of happiness and joy. Those things aren't reliant on another. These are the things that already exist within yourself. So Breaking up requires us to be able to be in that state of awareness where we're able to maintain the sense of our value and our purpose. For that to happen, we have to be free of our stories. These are the stories that we hold about ourselves that have us believe that we're loveless and unlovable. And until those stories have been released, our ability to be able to love ourselves and engage in our purpose is nearly impossible. And so part of that capacity to be able to experience an aware, healthy, joyful, dare I use the word separation, until we're able to be free of that story, that's never going to happen. So, an aware separation is a joyful, loving experience where the love continues, where the respect continues, where the friendship continues, where it's rich and engaged in spiritual values that's really honouring of each other and allows the freedom for each other to continue on their journey without fear of having hurt somebody, without the fear of loss, the grief, the guilt, the shame, all the things that often can go with those separations. I hope you found these 3 ways of exploring relationship of interest. They're certainly different to what we see in the world and what we see portrayed in movies, but they're real and they can happen. And what they are able to do is lead to a life of stillness. And as I've said in previous videos, be still and know that I am God. And it's in that place of stillness where we get to experience the divine. And it's our commitment to that level of stillness that would have us want to be in an aware relationship. My friends, thank you for taking time to listen. It's a big topic and a lot more time could be spent talking about this. What I'd encourage you to do is go to our website, www.eapmentor.com, and have a look at the wonderful stuff that's there about our program and how it helps you to be able to be still. And please go to our Facebook site at EAP Mentor, where you can find out on a daily basis beautiful things that we regularly post that are about helping to raise the standard of consciousness and awareness so that you can live your lives in stillness. Thank you for listening, and I'll speak to you again in a couple of weeks. Bye.